Let's get going with the Public Square today. The topic is death and taxes. Correction. Taxes is our subject today. I got your attention, though, didn't I? Welcome. Dave Zanotti is here, of course. Jeff Sanders, Melanie Elsey, Rob Walgate, Alan C. Duncan, and I'm Wayne Shepard. And the title of today's program, Dave, is...
What's in your wallet? No, what's not in your wallet?
What's not in your wallet? We all voted on that. It was unanimous. We like that. So.
And spontaneous. Wayne, the reason that we're stepping into this area is because there's going to be a tremendous amount of conversation really over the next couple of years in regards to what's going to happen in people's wallets, because it's going to really, we're talking about federal and state taxation, which actually impacts what's in your paycheck. And so we want to start a conversation today that I'm guessing will take us probably 6 episodes. It will actually, I think, become part of the American Mission Series. We might end up with a real seminar course here as to what is really happening. Now, as soon as we say that, I surely would be tempted to turn the dial myself because it's too painful to start with. And this first program is launching right at the peak of tax season, which is kind of like taxes or root canals. Which would I rather have?
Ironically, I got the note from my accountant this morning, so I'm right with you.
And I just sent mine an email before we started, which is why we were late in recording, because my wife said, are they sending that or are we sending that? And I had to go back and say, I don't forgot. Now I got to start all over again.
So I'll wait and see if it's good timing or bad timing to talk about this, but go ahead.
Yes, but I think when we get done with all of this conversation, I think a couple of things are going to happen. One, we're going to understand what's happening to us a lot better. 2, we're going to see the current political debates, both in Washington, D.C., in all of our individual states, in a much clearer light. And 3, I think there's actually a little light at the end of the tunnel, because I believe personally, and we've seen this for 45 years, I think as a functioning of the Word of God, when we obey the Word of God, that the truth truly can set people free, and that there is hope in the midst of all this process. But it may be a bit of an uphill climb to get there.
Yeah. So stick with us, and I think we'll all be better off in the end. So thanks for listening to The Public Square here. And we have a website as well you may know about called thepublicsquare.com. I hope you'll share that website even as we get started with this edition of the program.
And we have a phone app that is working once again. For about 5 days, it disappeared from the Apple universe. Yes. And we, of course, first thing we thought was, well, what did we mess up? Then the second we thought is, what did they mess up? Then the third thing we thought is maybe it's a conspiracy. And the fourth thing we found out was somebody missed an email, and nobody around this table, but one of our wonderful friends and allies and consultants. And so we kind of got, messed up, but we're back. We're back. The point is we're back.
Good.
Better than
We're back, and it's free. So the Public Square in your app store.
We're back, and it's free, and the subject is taxes. How does this work?
You will not be taxed in any way, shape, or form by using the app.
Right. Yes. For the duration of this conversation, Rob, you're going to be our default guy to start and finish most of the mathematical equations. So I would like for you and Melanie to ask and answer this question as far as what's not in your paycheck, or what is in your paycheck. And does anybody even know any longer, other than me and Wayne, what a pay stub is?
I can remember the first time I got a pay stub, the first job I had, and I looked at it and I couldn't believe, now we know by looking online, most people, what the deposit is into our checking account or savings account or however we receive our paycheck. But I remember the first time looking, and the numbers didn't add up, because I'm a math guy and I'd done the numbers in my head before, and I knew how much I was supposed to get paid. And when I got that paycheck, it wasn't a dollar or two off. I mean, it wasn't close. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a second. I feel like this is one of those things that you're taught a lot in school, right? But this is one of those things I think they should pull you aside in 9th grade, 10th grade and say, hey, we need to go over a few things. And one is, we're going to go over taxes, and we're going to go over your paycheck and how much you bring home. So that pay stub, where I can remember where I was working at they put it in your, kind of in your mailbox, if you will, on site. It was my first summer job at Columbia Gas, where my father had worked, and they put all the high school kids that had a dad there, they put their names into a hat and they drew 2, and that's who got the summer jobs. for the summer. Yeah, running the jackhammer, doing the stuff that you know, they didn't trust us long with that type of stuff, but we got to experience it. And I think the hope was, I know the hope was that there, you know, in Ohio, the cold winters, the warm summers, the hope was that these young kids in high school would go work for the summer and be like, I don't want to do, like, this is hard work. This is real stuff. We need to go, you know, go get your education. I think that's what all the dads had in mind for their kids. But I remember getting that first pay stub, and it wasn't even close. Wasn't even close to what I was expecting.
My mother was a high school math teacher, and she actually taught as several courses in our high school on how to do taxes, and kids would sign up for this. And I thought even back then, that was in the 70s, I thought, wow, yeah, that's a great thing. I should probably take that, but I never did.
I should have taken that instead of algebra.
Yeah. I've been out of high school for 45 years now. I still haven't used algebra, so it's great. But I remember my first paycheck.
That'll generate a few letters. That's Sanders, Sanders.
Yeah. Yes, I know. I know that by using cell phones and algorithms, I'm still using it, but I've never personally had to use it. But anyway, I remember my first paycheck, and I thought, well, I know I earned, you know, $75 or something, you know, whatever it was back in the ancient world, and yet it wasn't. It was considerably less. And I showed this to my mother and my father. I said, "What is this?" I said, "Oh, that's the taxes taken out." I said, "Well, what is it for?" I said, "Well, you know, police and fire and, you know, whatever. And also, I said, "What is FICA?" "Well, that's Social Security." I said, "Well, when am I going to collect that?" And they said, "Well, you know, probably in another 50 years, if it's even solvent." I said, "Oh, thanks, everybody." And I've had a bitter feeling about it ever since.
It felt like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
It just felt like robbing. That's all it was. It was just robbery.
I remember thinking, having that high school part-time job, that, well, my mom and dad pay the taxes. I should get this money. Should be my money.
Exactly.
You know, so.
It's not like babysitting and cutting the lawn, is it?
No.
Which made me think to myself, maybe we should do more babysitting and cutting the lawn and get these guys out of here. But see, I'm the Italian in the room, so I'm like already thinking there's got to be a way of getting around this.
And only in cash.
I was informed very quickly that no, that's not really the way the world works anymore, kid. And so this is where you get started. Alan, I can't resist. All right. First paycheck memory, were you well prepared, or did you have any shock?
I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone around this table. I have no memory of my first paycheck or pay stub. I have literally no memory. I don't consider myself good with money. I'm not good with numbers, so I just don't think about it. I'm word guy, and
I think it's safe to say it must not have been a large amount.
No,
my first.
Was it heads or tails? Which one? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Melanie, your turn. Were you prepared for the first pay stub shock moment?
Yes and no. Truth be told, my first job, I didn't have a paycheck. I was paid under the table. There were no taxes taken out because I was working for my parents, who took over my grandmother's flower shop, and my salary was 50 cents an hour. I was 13 years old, and so it was. I think the statute of limitations has run out on this, so I think I'm okay talking about it. But no, my first paid job that I can remember, I worked, it was a summer job between my college semesters. And I do remember thinking, wow, I worked all those hours and this is what I get. It was disappointing at best.
Do kids today in their first jobs actually, they get a paycheck, or they get a direct transfer? How do they see this information? Because we used to literally have the paper check. Are people still giving out paper checks today?
Well, we get our salaries deposited automatically. And I know, like, for example, at my husband's office, they get the physical pay stub.
They get the stub or the check? It's still direct deposited. They just get the stub part?
I believe it's just the stub part.
Yeah, so the check is direct deposited.
The check is direct deposited. But you do see the breakdown of what comes out.
When we get to the end of the year, everybody sees it because you've got to deal with your taxes. So you get that magical form that says, here's what you made, here's what came out in all those different places, which of course brings up a question that everyone's probably hollering at the radio right now. Wouldn't it be a different world if you actually had to look at that pay stub? We used to say, wouldn't it be a different world because you had the pay stub? Would it be a different world if instead of it being taken out of your check, you had to literally every paycheck write a check for all your taxes?
Those of us who are self-employed, guess what we do?
Yeah.
So you write those checks every week?
I write those checks quarterly.
Quarterly. So you see it, you see it, and you pay it. So there's a difference right there. If you're self-employed, you're going, I'm real aware of this.
And you're penalized if you don't pay your estimates.
And
Right.
if you are ordained as a minister, as I am, you are counted both as an employed person and self-employed. And so you have to take aside all that Social Security and pay that every 4 months.
And don't forget, as a self-employed person, you are paying both ends of FICA.
That is correct.
You're paying the employer and the employee contribution.
Kind of makes you wonder why the system would be set up to make it more difficult to be self-employed.
That's government.
Good place to take a break. Let's do it on the Public Square. We're off and running on this What's Not in Your Wallet program. Stay with us.
Let's see, there's our tithe, food and clothing budget, taxes, all the insurance, and the car payments. Where's the line in your budget that helps pay the bill for fixing what's wrong in America? Log on today at aproundtable.org and join the growing team that's giving every month to get America back on track. Make your monthly contribution to aproundtable.org. Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Okay, we're talking about taxes. Now, don't go away. Don't go anywhere today. This is good. This is going to be helpful to all of us as we talk about this. I know it's painful. I know it is, but let's dive deeply, Dave.
Well, and hopefully when we're done with this whole series, it'll be something that parents and grandparents can give to kids and grandkids and say, look, I don't want to be the one that bears this news for you. Here, listen to this. All right, because at least they'll break it to you gently. Let's take a look at what's actually in a pay stub. Now, again, the old days, people used to get paid checks and the checks had a stub, and the stub the check told you that what you take to the bank and the money you get. The stub told you who got there before you did and took their part of it out and what you were left with. So what's on that side of the ledger? What's on the side of what's being taken out? And now this gets tricky because a lot of times a pay stub will use the term deductions, which means they're deducting this from your gross pay, whether you're hourly or salary. And it's confusing because whenever the word gets used, deductions gets used around taxes, it has multiple meanings. All right. A deduction is something that you can take off of your tax bill, state or federal. But on the paycheck, it doesn't say that. So that just makes it even more confusing. But let's just say that what we're talking about here is who got to your check before you did. And it always starts with federal tax. Okay. And the federal tax is your income tax, right? That's what they're starting with. Now, how do you get your income tax taken out of your check? Well, when you get a job, you fill out a form. I think it's is it a W-9?
W-9, yeah.
No, not when you're employed. It's not a W-4.
Oh, I'm sorry.
correct.
Yeah,
W-9 is for the non-tax
self-employed.
or the
Yeah.
self-employed.
Well, look at that for knowledge. She knew the difference between a W-9 and a W-4.
Are you really surprised?
She gets the dollar raised, but you're going to take 50 cents away from her, probably.
Not even slightly. Okay. So the W-4 or the W-9, all right, there you go with your, when you fill that out, you explain how you want your taxes to be set up based upon the fact that every person who pays taxes has the right to declare themselves as a deductible entity. Now, you also have the right to declare zero in that situation, in which case the government will take more taxes as opposed to less. Then there's all kinds of reasons why people would do that back and forth. But the point of it is that's preset and that's the income tax number. Now, sometimes it's enough. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's too little. But in a paycheck scenario, you have to project and it comes out first. And this is what's important. Lesson number 1 in all this. Before anybody does any tithing or any charitable giving, the United States federal government takes your first dollar. And no matter whether there's a recession, no matter whether it's good times or bad, no matter whether there's inflation or not, the government gets paid always based on every penny that you earn, and they get their money first. That's a bit sobering. What's even more sobering is they're not very honest when it comes to disclosing that. Because first off, you got to understand the code and the language to even figure it out. Secondly, since most of us don't have pay stubs anymore, we really don't get a look at that but for once a year. And then we're sick for about 3 weeks and then we forget it. And they're counting on that. But let's say they go first. And that's really important to know. They do, in fact, go first. Okay, so that's the first thing that comes out is your income tax. Now, we could spend a whole session, and we will, talking about income tax. But let's jump to the next thing. FICASS tax. What the heck is that? I can hear a 16-year-old saying today, what the heck is that? FICASS tax. Rob, what is it?
FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act tax. So it's the FICA tax.
Does that mean that Congress passed a law that said they get to be the number 2 spot on your paycheck?
It means that they passed a law that says roughly 15.3% of your wages are going to go to Social Security and Medicare. So the insurance part of that act is that you are ensuring that folks are going to be taken care of in regards to Social Security and Medicare. The breakdown is 12.4% of that goes into Social Security and 2.9% of that must be paid into Medicare.
So that covers the elderly. It covers survivors of folks who have paid into that account, and it covers disability insurances as well. So it's between Social Security and Medicare, it's got a pretty broad spectrum, but it's only applied to earned income. So that would not be applied to like investment income or other sources of income. It's earned income.
Since most of us going out getting our first jobs aren't doing it because we're looking to supplement our trust funds, it pretty much is something everybody walks through. Now, there are people that don't pay FICA, right? They are exempted out of the Social Security system, right?
Oh, self-employed pay double.
There's one group of people, if you're clergy, from the time that you are ordained, you have 1 year, or it could be a year and a half now, to opt out. But then you can never, ever opt back in. And the way to do that is if you can prove that you believe that the state has no biblical reason to take care of you in your old age. If you can make that case and say that you have consistently believed this, then you can opt out.
Well, what if you consistently believe that the state will be unable to take care of you in your old age? Do you get to opt out on that just based on sheer logic and reason? That's a perfectly clear religious bias, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you, but no, they're not going to go for
on this one. That should be illegal.
But then Social Security benefits are also taxed, right? As well.
Yes.
Wait. We're still identifying.
You're getting ahead of us, Alan.
You are way too young. You are way too young to bring that to the table. We will get there. All right.
Okay.
Well,
It just seems weird. That seems weird to me.
What a great gig this was. You know?
In some states, I believe like teachers are exempt from portions of FICA because they have their own retirement system, so they don't receive Social Security. So
First responders, and police in a lot of states,
government retirement, people
and there are
benefit
some
that way.
students who are enrolled at least half time and also employed by universities who are exempt. There are some number of state and local employers, government employers who have their own systems. And even in the Native American community, there are some who are exempt from FICA.
Okay, so some are exempt, but most for certain are not. And the idea here is simple. We're not going to get into Social Security yet. We will get there. We will get to Social Security. And the question was, is it reasonable? Is it ethical? Is it moral? Does it work? We could go to so many different ways. But for right now, FICA SS Tax and FICA Medicare are basically two programs that Congress initiated that you don't get a vote on. All right. And I mean, at least you don't get a vote on when you're picking up your paycheck. They did it for you, and they decided that you are going to drop about 15% of your income, whether you like it or not, off the top into these two methodologies. Now, one thing I will tell you about Social Security is it was designed, sold, marketed, and passed as an idea of keeping people out of the poorhouse. When it began, it was a fraction of what it is right now. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was 1 or 2%. It's now 15%. And the idea was that just because some people just couldn't save, couldn't take care of themselves, and never accumulated enough money, we don't want to see them go to the poorhouse. So all of us will chip in and do something. It's kind of like a really benevolent idea spread across a whole nation and run by the government. What could go wrong with that? Okay, so that's what that thing is on your paycheck. What's the next stuff that you get on your check? Anybody got one up there? What do you get?
I think the next line, in states that have an income tax, you would see your state income tax. And obviously that varies in the 50 states in the country, because some states have zero income tax and some have a somewhat high rate of income tax. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
We're at 4. We've got federal income tax, FICA Social Security tax, FICA Medicaid tax, state tax, and then it's in many places there's a 5th, which would be a local tax, right?
Yeah, depending on the community that you live or possibly you could work. Now, this tax created a lot of argument during COVID because you had people working in large urban areas that are taxed on their income for where they had to go to work every day. However, those people were told they were not permitted to go to work into those cities and municipalities, and yet they were therefore still being taxed in those cities and municipalities. And people were saying, wait a minute, you want to take a percentage and a half of my paycheck, and you're not permitting me to go to my office.
Well, we're working our way through the pay stub here today on the Public Square. Very helpful. And if you joined us late, you can always catch up by listening online at thepublicsquare.com or with that newly again available smartphone app called the Public Square.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square.
The Front Steps, a true story of how a child's love for reading helped change the world. Share it with those you love today. Visit thefrontstepsbook.com. That's thefrontstepsbook.com.
What an interesting discussion today on the Public Square. The first of many, according to Dave Zanotti, that we're going to come back to this topic again in the future because I know we'll only scratch the surface here today, right, Dave?
Sure. And why is it important? Because, you can't really get a grid on what's going on in our federal government right now on two huge issues. The first is whether or not there will be an extension of tax deductions and tax reforms that were done in 2017, which seems like, wow, that's 8 years ago. Well, if those things completely stop, then these 4 things we've already talked about, actually 5, the 5 visitors that come to your paycheck, the 5 ghosts of taxes present and taxes future and taxes past, there's actually 5 of them. they will be revisiting you at almost certainly greater rates all across the board. But see, if you don't know there are actually 5 ghosts attacking your paycheck before you even see the number, then how can you be current in the debate? How can you understand this in perspective? And the thing is that most of us want to pull the blanket over our head and pretend we can make the ghosts go away. And that's what the politicians are counting on. See, that's something. So we've got federal tax, we've got FICA Social Security tax, we've got FICA Medicare tax, we've got state tax, and now we've got local tax. You know, people misunderstand the Tea Party all around. The Tea Party stood for taxed enough already. That's what TEA stood for.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Well, I'll add one more ghost that always pops up and haunts me. Where I live, I have a city tax that's slightly different than the local tax that is on my pay stub. I have to pay the city very specifically, just them through their own website. I've had to go downtown and have meetings with city tax people. It's it's very annoying. And you don't, like, if you don't know about it, you just don't do it. And then they send you something that says you're going to go to jail in 90 days if you don't pay us the $200 you owe us.
Really?
Plus extra penalties.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to put you in you owe us money. We're going to put you in jail where you can't earn any money so that you can
Sounds like
earn
debtor's
money
prison.
to pay us
Yeah.
what you owe us. It
And
makes
that's
sense.
just city tax.
I started us on this Dickens run with the ghosts of Christmas past and present. Now here we are. We're there. We're now in debtor's prison. Okay. Right? So what we've got is Alan's got 6 of those ghosts annihilating his paycheck before he gets the number.
And I still hit a pothole every time I pull out of my driveway. So
Move out where I live. Much happier. You'll be much happier.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is what every young person who enters into the workforce, regardless of socioeconomics, race, creed, color, geography, this is what you face on that first paycheck. And the reality is this is what you're most likely to face, or worse, for the rest of your working career. Now let's just stop for a second and ask ourselves, how did we get here? How did we get to this situation? Was there a time when it didn't look like this? Can we roll back the clock and say, if you had a pay stub, let's say, I don't know, 1900, 1910, 1920, 1940, did it look different? Were these things not around? What's the history here?
We started the income tax with the 16th Amendment in 1913, which, by the way, was being pushed by the Republican Party, just so everybody knows, so that the federal government would stick their hands into your income and take a piece every time you get a paycheck. Didn't have it before 1913.
Up until that time, the revenue came from what? Tariffs?
And excise taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
There was a period of time where there was a temporary element. You all have covered that in a previous...
During the Civil
During
War,
the
there
Civil
was
War.
a temporary income tax.
You got to
yes.
pay for cannons and muskets
Right,
and things like that.
and it finished. It was all done until 1913.
There was a sunset clause. That's correct.
So why did we need a constitutional amendment to get into a federal income tax? I mean, a constitutional amendment?
I'm a little foggy on this, but it had to do with something about being apportioned among the states, that it had to be an even tax among everybody in the states, if I'm not too badly mistaken.
It was based on the census, right? It was based on population at some point.
There you go. Yeah.
The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. Isn't that an odd little one sentence? That sentence now has turned into enough federal code on taxation policy that you could probably, if you stacked it on top of each other, it might be a 2-story building.
Yeah, no question.
And when we looked at that sentence, collect taxes on incomes, and then the next 4 words, from whatever source derived. Boy, they've went after that over the past 115 years, from whatever source derived. I mean, when you think about what they consider income and where that arrives from, so they're going to get their hands on it and tax it in any way they can.
So first off, there was a prohibition against what would be called a head tax or an individual tax. Taxes were to be a relationship between the states and the federal government. Now the federal government was saying, thank you, states, we're past you. Your boundary line is more sentimental and ornamental. Now we're going after your people. But to do that, we've got to have a constitutional amendment so you can't come back and sue us. And the Supreme Court said we don't have the authority, so we'll create the authority. And while we're going to create it, let's make it big. Let's make it real big. Like, let's not define income. Let's not define taxes specifically. And let's add 4 simple words. Melanie, you have to love these. These have to be 4 of the most powerful words ever conceived in constitutional construction from whatever source derived.
Yeah, sidebar story to that. For the first time ever this past year, we sold something on eBay. Well, guess what we got from eBay? We got a tax statement of what is owed to the federal government on the sale of a small item on eBay.
Well, what I notice about what those 4 words are saying is that it doesn't require Congress to pass a tax. It just says it has the authority to lay and collect taxes. So it could roll back and not collect taxes on certain things, which is what they're doing now in the current conversation with no tax on tips. And, anything that has to go through Congress has the authority to tax and to roll back taxes.
Now, see, what we're witnessing right now is a Melanie Elsey quicksand trap. I've watched her. I've watched her in committee meetings. I've watched her in private conversations and legislative sessions. I've watched her just gently raise a question about a piece of language and then watch somebody step on it and sink straight to the bottom of the lake, because she's exactly right. It doesn't mean you have to. Of course, Melanie, it seems like they just seem to be prone to, right?
Oh, it's out of control. I mean, what I think is an interesting exercise, and at the end of this discussion on paychecks, I think every parent, every adult, anybody who's getting taxed out of their paychecks should always make a practice, because we've done this the last 5 or 6 years. Request a copy of your final paycheck for the year and add up the withholding part, take it as a percentage of the gross. This is separate and distinct from filing your taxes. So just get a percentage of what you're losing, what's not in your paycheck. Look at what that number is and compare it. I have a piece of paper in my computer that has the last 5 years in a line item, like not in a chart, but descriptive line item. So I can look at the last 5 years. Between 50 and 51% of a paycheck, of my husband's paycheck, has been in various different withholdings only, not the dental insurance, not the things that we choose to take out of our paychecks, but what we don't choose to get removed from our paychecks. It's very interesting.
Let's take a quick break on the Public Square. And again, our topic today, what's not in your wallet. And we'll be back. Back with you with this week's edition of The Public Square, found online, thepublicsquare.com. I'm Wayne Shepard here with Dave Zanotti and Jeff Sanders, Melanie Elsey, Rob Walgate, and Alan C. Duncan, our producer, and on mic with us as well. And we've been talking about your paycheck stub here and what all is involved there. But let's go a little broader on this topic, Dave, and talk about some of the more principal things about this whole matter.
Wayne, for our most faithful listeners, to whom we are so very, very thankful. We really are. In fact, one of our staff people today called the folks that listen to this program in every format that's published, the 2-minute, the 5-minute, the weekend, the daily, the longer format, everywhere we are. She called them our ride or die listeners. Okay. for the ride or die listeners. Okay. There are a lot of paths that we could take right now on this, but we are promising you, we are going to come back and try to exhaust this subject if we can. And it will probably take, I'm guessing, about 6 hours of conversation. I'm guessing. But we'll be back on a regular basis through the balance of this year into next year, because there's something very important here.
Glad to know. Yeah.
And what's important is not just the sense of, wait a minute, I think I'm getting ripped off. Okay, that's tempting. And a lot of organizations and a lot of talk radio, people would like to stop right there and just fuel that sense of injustice or that sense of outrage. Let's stop for a second. There are two principles here, both which are in the Bible. And they're actually in conflict with each other. You ready? The first is the clear biblical teaching from Genesis through Revelation that God gave us the concept of private property on this earth. I have news for some people. God is not a socialist. Sorry. That's not in the Judeo-Christian revelation. Just not real. God is a big believer in private property. In fact, we could start the whole way back in the book of Genesis, and we can keep going the whole way through. And let's just take a little brief visit. Let's just stop real quickly. In Exodus, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. Well, if the idea isn't that there isn't the right to private property, who's stealing, right? If everybody owns everything or a portion of everything, and I can exercise by the power of my will or just by my power to take from you what you thought was yours because I think it's mine. But see, it doesn't work that way. God is very, very specific throughout Judaic law, throughout the teachings of the New Testament. I mean, private property is a very big deal. A very big deal to God. And it's legitimate. And it's a part of the whole revelation and all of culture in the West. Private property is real. Here's another teaching, however. Pay taxes where taxes are due. That's relevant in both the Old Testament and in the New. And St. Paul taught that very specifically. So God says you have the right to private property, but God also says you have the responsibility to pay taxes. And Jesus paid taxes. Remember that story in the Bible?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, with Peter and the fish, and the question, does your master pay taxes? And Jesus did.
But Dave, don't we have the story in Acts chapter 2, 3, and 4 that everybody sold what they had and they laid it at the apostles' feet, and everybody lived in a commune. So they are, God is a socialist,
you
right?
You can't even make that argument with feigned credibility. You're awful at it, Jeff. Come on. You know that's nonsense. All right? You know that's absolute nonsense.
It was all voluntary.
Practice that in the mirror next time, Jeff.
Yeah, you got to rehearse that so much better. It was all voluntary.
But that's what people have said to me.
Well, okay, yeah. People say a lot of things, but that was all voluntary. But let's remember also in that climate and environment, when someone lied about that situation and said, I gave all that I had and lied in essence to the Holy Spirit, God struck them dead. Oops. Okay.
And Peter said, while it was in your possession, was it not your own to do with it as you please? That's Acts chapter 5. Look at the first, 10 verses.
Well, let's take another New Testament illustration, one that I think gets overlooked a lot. Remember that parable where the people went out to work and the guy hired them early in the morning and gave them an agreement on a wage for the day, and they went out to work, and then the guy decided to hire more people in the morning, more people at noon, and then right up to like the last hour of the day, and they all come in to get their paycheck, and they look at their pay stub, and it's all the same. The guy who worked an hour got the same as the guy who worked all day, and they said, hey, whoa, this isn't fair. This is Jesus talking now. And what has Jesus said? He says, excuse me, this is how he portrayed the honor. It's my money, and it's your right to make a contract. You made the deal. I paid the deal. What's the problem?
You got what you were promised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that translation, by the way. Yeah.
There is a huge illustration there in regards to, now, the question isn't whether it was necessarily just because it was a parable to prove something else. But the fact is, Jesus didn't take a tangent and give us a lecture on socialism at that stage in the game. The doctrine of private property was very real on both sides of that, both the right of private property and the right of contract, and, if you will, the result of consequence. So there you go. So private property, we could go on and on about the establishment of private property. That's very real. But what about so what about the taxes side? I mean, how do we deal with that?
We still have an obligation in this world under Caesar, if you will. We still live under a government, and government was created by God, whether we like that or not. He doesn't ask our opinion on it. Government was created first to secure our liberties and to protect. Well, in order to do that, government needs some kind of force, a police force, a military force, or whatever, to protect people's rights. And that requires taxation.
So there are taxes that are just. Are there taxes that are unjust?
I would say down through the ages, there have been some that are unjust, yes. I think I'm paying some now.
Okay. Yeah,
No,
you're
you're
probably not
unjust.
feeling alone on that.
No, I don't feel good about it. But God doesn't ask me if I feel good about it or not.
So, but how do we resolve these 2 points of conflict? We are to pay taxes where taxes are due, and we are to be careful to not surrender our right to private property because God gave it to us. How do you balance those two things?
I think it's easier to balance it in our culture than it is globally. Scripture was written for everyone on earth, but not everyone on earth has the system of government that we have, where we have derived the authority to Congress from the consent of the governed. That doesn't exist everywhere, but at least in our pay stubs, we can connect the dots on those two principles in Scripture.
We have the responsibility of the people that we elect to hold public office as well that are making those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on us to be engaged and involved. A lot of times when people will tell me, they don't vote because it doesn't matter, it doesn't make a difference, I always joke with them, show me your paycheck. I don't want to know how much you make, but I want to show you the percentages that you pay into different things. And if you don't care, those percentages will always go up. And the more you don't care, the faster they go up, because people will get elected that don't have a vested interest in what the people are wanting or needing.
And really, we're only talking on one side of the coin because we're talking about what comes out of our pay stubs. And I'm hoping in future discussions we can talk about what happens to the money that they're spending from our pay stubs. Because it seems like the more they get, the more they want to spend. And the more they want to spend, the more they say they need to get. It's a cycle.
All right, we have a final segment coming up. Dave, give us a little hint of what's ahead here in the last few minutes.
Well, a little bit of homework towards hope, and that's what did James Madison have to say about all this? And it's in an amazing document. It's only one page long, but it is a blockbuster.
A few of you must leave us at this time. Please join us online or with that smartphone app for the remainder of our program. The rest of you, stay right where you are for the last few minutes of the Public Square.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square. Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Great conversation today on the Public Square, as always, with the team. A very helpful conversation today, though, about taxes and the principles behind them. And let's pick it up for the last few minutes here with the team. Dave?
Well, for those that are frustrated because we've opened this gigantic can of worms, please understand we did so from the start. We're saying to you again, you got to stick with us, friends. We love you. We understand. We really, truly do. There are a lot of subjects. There are so many more topics on this, both on the spending side and the taxing side and the justice side. Many, many more things, and we are going to stick around to talk about them. But we wanted to get a platform set up, starting with where we all live, what's in your paycheck and what's not in your wallet. So remember, let's review. Some people have as many as 6 different places where the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future come in and swipe the money so that it disappears and they get first dollar. So let's remember that's where we started. Now we're to the place of saying founding principles. What's the Bible say? And the Bible has a conflict between the difference of you should pay taxes where taxes are due, but you also have the right to private property and to protect it. So James Madison, who is considered to be the father of the U.S. Constitution. Now, it wasn't that he had all the ideas, but he took the most notes at the convention. And so, and he was incredibly diligent, and he had a lot of the ideas. So Rob, Madison put out a one-page document on property, and it is a blockbuster. Anybody can read it. It's only one page long. And understand, Madison was not a Democrat or a Republican. Okay, this is before all that stuff came to pass. This is when they were all in it together, and they were writing about the self-evident truths that they agreed upon which they would then build a government built upon the consent of the governed. And for Madison, the question of property was paramount. Rob, what's that paragraph that you like so much?
Government is instituted to protect the property of every sort, as well as that which lies in the various rights of individuals, as that which the term particularly expresses. This being the end of government, that alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own, with an emphasis on own.
Sounds pretty biblical to me.
Government is instituted to protect property of every sort. This is what James Madison. Why did we start a government? To protect property. Wait a minute, we didn't start a government to build a beautiful city in Washington, D.C. We didn't start a government to become a global empire. We started a government to protect somebody's 2 bits.
Well, and this is from the same piece. Yes, your property is stuff. He says property is a man's land or merchandise or money. Then he goes on. He says, in a latter sense, a man has a property in his opinions and the free communication of them.
So in your mind,
that is also considered
continue the alliteration.
Yes, your property. He goes on one more sentence, says, he has a property of particular value in his religious opinions and in the profession and practice dictated by them. So the property of your religious opinions was one of the reasons that this government, probably the premier reason this government was established.
Well, he more specifically states that conscience is the most sacred of all property. And earlier in the same piece, where we have an excess of power prevailing, no man is safe in his opinions, his person, his faculties, or his possessions. So it's a spectrum of what I have and who I am.
Everything that's yours. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing. A lot of times when people say this, it's the don't tread on me, kind of thing. And it feels very individual. Me, my stuff. If it applies to you, it applies to your neighbor. You're saying this about your neighbor. Mm-hmm. They have their property, whether it's stuff or what they think. So it's not just for me. It's for you and you and you and you and you and you and people I disagree with and people I don't like. And it's supposed to be for everybody.
And this piece was written in March of 1792 for the National Gazette.
3 years into the functioning of the new constitutional government. In that same paragraph, Alan, I would repeat what Rob read earlier. This being the end of government, that alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. Now, this is a twist on words, if you will. This is Madison taking the accepted philosophical understanding of the meaning of justice, which is to each his own, which, of course, is incumbent upon private property.
I felt like Dr. Allen was in the room when I was reading this piece. He's told us these things many times. There was also one more really good line in here. It says, a man is said to have a right to his property. He may be equally said to have a property in his rights. Ooh. That sounded like Chesterton to me for a second.
That sounds like a T-shirt.
Yeah.
That sounds like a T-shirt to me.
Yeah. Just that nice dual flip. It was good.
It's no mystery as to what the Constitution really means. You don't go to Oliver Wendell Holmes 100 years later to find out what the Constitution means. The people who wrote it and what they meant, they actually wrote explanations. It's not that hard.
So where we are, Wayne, in this conversation is this: we've got a clear track record. We've got attention in the biblical question of the right to private property, which Madison so eloquently expands upon and makes it really clear. And then we've got the question of pay taxes where taxes are due. So the question then becomes, well, what's a fair tax? How do I know when it's due? Those are all subjects we're going to get to. But before we get into the specifics, let's get into the process. And the process in our Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women implied are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. That is the bridge that was built between these two principles that can be in tension or in competition. And that is that it is the consent of the governed that decides when to tax, when not to tax, what tax is just, what tax is not. That's the American formula. And that is a unique formula. And it requires within its application a tremendous amount of discipline and a tremendous awareness of reality. It's not like the county fair. It's not like, the balloon dunk. It's not, where you hit the ball, the guy drops down in the tank, it's not get even with your enemies. It's not you got what I want, so I'm going to take it from you. And if I can't have it, the government will. No. It's very personal and it's very balanced and it's built on eternal principles, not upon personal passion. The government is not designed to be the great equalizer, and therein is justice. That's the point. It's to each his own, not to each mine or yours, to each his own. So let's close with this word from Madison. The United States, now get this, he says, if the United States mean to obtain, wait a minute, you mean if the United States means to obtain? No. In 1789, the individual states were still recognized as individual entities, not just one conglomerate. If the United States or the states united mean to obtain or deserve the full praise due to wise and just governments, notice the plural, he's including the states and the federal at the same time, they will equally respect the rights of property and the property in rights. They will rival the government that most sacredly guards the former, and by repelling its example in violating the latter, will make themselves a pattern to that and to all other governments.
Such a powerful statement by James Madison, and I'm so glad that we brought it up today here on the Public Square. And indeed, this whole conversation has been so helpful today. But as Dave has indicated, we plan on future programs to pick it up from here and talk a lot more about some of these issues. So you stay with us for that series here on the Public Square. In the meantime, thanks for your support of the American Policy Roundtable. The Public Square would not exist here without your support. So thank you very much. See you next week.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.